The Elder Wand. The Resurrection Stone. The Cloak of Invisibility. Together they make the Deathly Hallows. Together they make one Master of Death. The last will and testament of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore.
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 14, The Thief, today. Julie is with us.
Hi everybody.
We have an interesting chapter. It's one of Julie's favorite chapters.
Who's excited to go camping?
Julie!
For the rest of the book. Actually, Dan, I hate camping. I only go glamping. Maybe that's why I have so much animosity towards this book.
To be fair, they are kind of glamping. I mean, this tent is amazing, which we will get to later.
Fair.
We begin the section of the book that Julie is a big fan of. So,
Harry Potter and the Prolonged Camping Trip.
Yeah, be prepared for all of these hot takes. First, we have a couple of hot takes from our listeners. A couple of shout-outs here. First one comes from AV, who left a comment on Chapter 11, The Bribe. And the comment is, "So, just want to comment on something that you keep bringing up about Harry not cooperating with the Ministry of Magic. Well, after listening to the Order of the Phoenix book, I say that's a ridiculous complaint." Woo! Bringing the fire, AV. He was literally abused by the Ministry and framed by them. And they accused him as not being all there. After all of this, there was, I'm assuming no apology is what you mean. There was no apology from them at all. No internal inquiry about the corruption. There was literally nothing. So why in the world would he have any bit of trust for them?
We've gotten into this argument before, Dan. I think that Harry has no obligation to the Ministry.
AV, I think it's safe to say Julie, as well as the vast majority of general people, as from what I've heard, is on your side here. First of all, I'll go one further on your comment, not just the Order of the Phoenix. You go halfway into Goblet of Fire once the Triwizard Tournament gets ramped up. They're not very kind to Harry either there.
Correct.
So yeah, you can go halfway into Goblet of Fire and find the Ministry being a little antagonistic towards Harry. So it's about a year and a half where Harry catches a lot of smoke.
Yep.
And that, I get it. And I even understand Harry not being able to switch that mentality because Harry's been the target of it. I guess more of my complaints have been towards the Order and to Dumbledore because you're adults and you've been through the first Wizarding War and you know how bad that was. And I get it. The Ministry was brutal to Harry.
And to Dumbledore.
And
it wasn't just to Harry, it was to Dumbledore too. So why, because I already know where you're going with this, Dan, but why would the Order of the Phoenix, that was founded by Dumbledore, and Dumbledore is like, you know, up on their pedestal of gold or whatever you want to call it, why, after the Ministry tore down Harry, tore down Dumbledore, so Dumbledore, original founder of Order of the Phoenix, Harry, essentially now the new leader of the Order of the Phoenix, whether we want to say that or not, he's the figurehead leader, but why would the Order sit there and go, you know what, it's fine, you tore down Dumbledore, you tore down Harry, you've torn down all of us in the process, but sure, we'll join in and help you guys fix things. Absolutely not. The Order does not have an obligation to the Ministry.
The harsh reality is they can't win this alone. They figured that out in the first Wizarding War when the McKinnons passed away, when the Pruitts passed away, when X, Y, Z, all of them.
Who's running the Ministry right now, though, Dan? So why it wouldn't have helped them at all if they joined up with the Ministry?
So my theory is maybe it's inevitable. Maybe it is inevitable that the Ministry eventually falls. But if the Order and the Ministry of Magic combined their forces, that inevitable fall is harder to accomplish.
If you've partnered the Order with the Ministry, if you're able to infiltrate the Ministry, you take them both down at the same time.
I'm not saying share secrets like about Horcruxes or anything like that. That's on the side. I'm just saying, like, share information. Hey, werewolves are moving here. Hey, giants are moving across the country to this location. Hey, we're getting reports of Death Eater disappearances here, here, and here.
I'm violently shaking my head no at Dan right now, since
But why?
we're not. I don't think it makes any sense for them to do that, because they don't know who to trust within the ministry, whereas the Order is a tight-knit
Rufus.
community.
They knew who to trust, and it was Rufus.
Why? They've been betrayed so many times
Not
in the
by Rufus.
past. Not by him, but why would you then turn around and go, hey, the next guy is going to be better? When now he's a brand new minister, you don't know which direction he's going to take things, and right now the only thing that he's done is try to bully Harry into being the poster boy for the ministry. It makes zero sense for the Order to band together with the ministry just because there's a new minister of magic. With all of the history that they had, Alexa, cue Bad Blood by Taylor Swift. With all of the bad blood that they have had, why would they now go, there's a new guy in charge, let's test it out, at the same time that we know Voldemort is gaining power, that he's trying to get into the ministry? For all you know, he could be a plant. It could be like Snape, where everyone thought that, well, not necessarily like thought that Snape was good, but they assumed that since Dumbledore trusted him, that he was on their side, and instead he kills Dumbledore. So why wouldn't Rufus potentially be the same thing for Voldemort? Now you have the Minister of Magic that could be owned by the Death Eaters.
You trusted them enough to have them help with setting up protections for you, your family, your friends, your close loved ones, which worked, by the way. It did work.
But why share more information than you need to? The Order of the Phoenix
Not more than you need to.
Such a tight-knit group of everyone knowing that everyone could be trusted on some level.
You will lose.
And now, because of that, everyone innately trusted Snape because he was part of the Order of the Phoenix. And then look what happened. So why let anyone else in on the club? Why give them any information when you don't know where that information's going? You don't know who's listening. You don't know who has eyes. You don't know who's cursed. I think there is zero obligation for the Order to cooperate with the ministry. I get asking for help from the ministry for some protections, because also that's the ministry's job. The ministry's job is to protect its people. So I also think that Joe Schmo down the street could have gone to the ministry and said, hey, I feel we're being targeted. Can you help protect me? I think that the members of the Order had a stronger case for that protection since they were so closely aligned with Dumbledore.
There's so few of them.
Yeah. And
comparatively.
Yes. Like, there's so few of them, but also they're higher up on the Death Eaters kill list because of how closely connected they are to Harry and Dumbledore. So to me, it makes sense that you would ask for that extra protection, and I don't think that that creates an obligation for the Order to push information to the ministry.
Voldy wants division. He wants separation. It's easier to take out the ministry when it's just the ministry. It's easier to take out the Order when it's just the Order. You separate them, they fall. I think Harry punishes Rufus and punishes the current, or not the current, because we're in chapter 14 now, but he punishes Rufus's administration for the faults of the Fudge administration, which all of what AV referenced, Order of the Phoenix, was a Fudge administration. The only thing that Harry really can pin Rufus down on, which he didn't even really pin him down on it, and that's a critique I have of Harry, is why is Umbridge still at the Ministry of Magic? I think that's the biggest argument he has against the Rufus administration. And he doesn't even press that at all, which, okay.
But when Rufus gets to Harry, there is no talk of partnership. There's no talk of an alliance. It's a talk of duty, and
you're closing the window. You're foregoing any leverage you have as Harry Potter. You're just saying no to it full out.
As he should. Because all Rufus does is he comes in and says, hey, you have a duty to do this to the people, and we need the golden boy to be the golden boy again. There's no level of, listen, I get that you were wronged by the former minister. I get that you have a distrust of the ministry for how much it tore you apart, but you need to know that that's not what I am.
You should
There
know...
was nothing like that. And as a leader of the ministry, you should have enough common sense that if you are going and getting someone to cover your ass and make you, the golden minister, like, you need to come in and offer something to Harry. Not that he gets to be on posters and do a Captain of America Rally the Troops tour, but that you realize he was wronged and that Dumbledore was wronged and that everyone around you was wronged, and that you understand that and you're trying to correct it. So please, let's work on this
Rufus
together.
isn't concerned with Harry's feelings. He's worried about winning a war.
If he's worried about winning a war, then he needs to know how to get people on his side. And that was not it.
If we know one thing about Harry Potter through the first 6 books, he needs help. He needs help to do everything.
Not from
he
the
does.
ministry. When has the ministry actually helped Harry Potter?
You realize Kingsley is an Auror, part of the ministry. You realize Tonks is an Auror,
But
part of the
he's
ministry.
not.
You
They're
realize
not
Moody.
acting on behalf of the ministry.
They're Aurors.
It
That's
doesn't
their
matter.
job. They literally are working for the Ministry of Magic to protect Harry Potter.
They were working for the Ministry of Magic against the ministry's
Their boss
wishes.
was Rufus, because he was the head of magic law enforcement. So he was directing care of Harry Potter. Literally.
No.
Well, that's literally his job. Well, you know what, Julie? We have another comment.
Did you look and try to find someone who was going to agree with you?
No. I didn't look for anything. Hey, look, AV, you just brought the heat to me. You called me out for my opinions, and that's okay. I am fully ready to back them up, as I have tried to do with Julie here, because Julie agrees with you 100%. But there is another comment. So, Sandhya says, this is also same episode, The Bribe, chapter 11. Sandhya says, thanks for the shout out, guys. While I do believe Ministry's methods are questionable, I think Dan's take is great. Thank you, Sandhya. She continues, after all the warnings from Dumbledore and Sorting Hat to stay united from within, it wasn't ever discussed with Harry. While this could be one of Albus's rare monumental mistakes, he most likely considered all possible paths and only the Horcrux path mattered. And it was too late when Rufus came to power and Ministry fell and collateral damage was considered inevitable for the greater good. Thank you, Sandhya, for the comment. Thank you, AV, too. I'm not biased. I really am not. If you have opinions that are against mine, that's fine. Comment, too. I love debating it. It's all good. But no, to Sandhya's point, I think the interesting thing there that we haven't even remotely discussed in all of this is there have been warnings from the Sorting Hat recently been like, hey, united, be united. I think that's an interesting point from Sandhya.
But just because you're united doesn't mean that you have to be working intertwined. You can work alongside each other.
That's all I'm asking.
There's a difference between Harry saying yes to Rufus and being the poster child for the Ministry's fight against Voldemort, and the Order not fighting against the Ministry.
I'm not saying, like I said, I'm not saying to divulge all the Horcrux info. Keep that on the need-to-know basis. Even amongst the Order. Keep that amongst the trio, and the trio only, because that's like a secret mission on top of a secret mission. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Ministry doesn't need to know about that. Troop movements and different protections in place and stuff like that, I think most people, even in the Order, knew Rufus was legit. They had murmurs about, we think Pius has been Imperious. We have reason to believe Pius is Imperious. Okay, great. Well, work with Rufus and see if you can figure that out. That kind of communication, I think, would have been key. You need numbers. Voldy is amassing massive numbers. Whether by force or by recruitment, he's amassing large quantities of creatures and individuals. Having a group of 10 Order of the Phoenix members ain't enough.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's necessarily enough, but I don't think that adding the Ministry into it is going to make it better.
They're separating other prodigious witches and wizards getting them on their lonesome to get them. Like Amelia Bones was attacked in her house. She's not a member of the Order of the Phoenix per se, but a prodigious witch that might be of use, well, no, not anymore. Rufus was a big target of Voldy. He's like, okay, we need to get Rufus out to fully get the ministry. You need allies to win this war.
They are allies. Just because they're not sharing trade secrets doesn't mean that they're working against each other.
There could be more done, and the fact that Harry is so antagonistic towards Rufus for the crimes that Fudge portrayed against him is unfair to Rufus and what he's trying to accomplish, which is winning the war, which is what Harry wants. This might be an opportunity to create a new relationship with a new Minister of Magic.
No, because Rufus was in a desperate place trying to get a poster child.
Rufus is in a desperate place because people are dying. People are dying.
That's not Harry's problem to fix.
See, people will say that it is because he feels like he's been given this mission. It's supposed to be Voldy versus him.
And now all of a sudden you've decided because it's convenient for you that he should solve your problems. When at the end of the day, he is still a 16-year-old kid.
What if Rufus didn't just come to that conclusion now? He's always felt that way. He just wasn't the Minister of Magic at the time.
I still don't think it matters.
That's putting Rufus in a real tough spot. When he has outs, he knows he has outs to help win a war, and he's getting refuted constantly by the actual out. For example, at the will of Albus Dumbledore, he questions Harry about the sword. Oh, does he think the sword of Godric Gryffindor will help? And Harry's like, oh, yeah, have you tried stabbing him with it and whatever? We all know, Harry, you wanted that sword. You wanted that sword, didn't you? You really did. You're like, ooh, the sword of Godric Gryffindor. Oh, wait, he wants it too. No, it's nothing. Try stabbing him. Try poking him with it. You know, come on, Harry. Come on. Well, regardless.
Let's talk about camping, Dan.
We do have a chapter to get to. Thank you. Seriously, all debate aside, thank you to both Avi and Sandhya for the comments. We obviously love debating these things. We love getting into the gritty details of such arguments and debates. So thank you for joining in that debate. We really appreciate it. For anybody else who also wants to join the debate, you can leave a comment on this episode on Spotify. There's also a poll that accompanies the episode that we drop on Spotify, so please participate in that as well. If you want to reach out to us in other ways, there's always Twitter, Instagram, there's YouTube. You can find all of those at Hogwarts a Pod. So join the discussion. Join that debate. We do like hearing from all of you, even if you have differing opinions from us. I know,
especially if you have differing opinions from Dan. Then we love hearing from you.
I know
even more.
Julie is finally on the winning side of an argument.
Yes,
and she just loves that everybody is with her. However, I will defend my position thoroughly. But anyway, we do have a chapter, and yes, it does involve a campsite. So we leave the cliffhanger that was the last episode, and the last chapter where they're apparating from the ministry. They get to Grimmauld Place. They figure out, nope, can't do that. And we apparate to this place, which is a forest. And initially it's a little disorienting because no one knows exactly where they are, especially Harry, who's our point of view. And he sees Ron is nearby and Hermione is tending to Ron because he has been splinched. Ooh. And not splinched, haha, funny, oh my gosh, he's missing an eyebrow. No, there is a sizable chunk missing from his arm, and there is a lot of blood. So Hermione sends Harry to get Dittany, Essence of Dittany, from her bag, and Harry uses what spell, Julie?
Accio Dittany!
There you go.
Look at that. Useful.
It's a great spell. It's a very useful spell. It's
3 tricks.
I know we had that poll, which spell, if you can use it in your real life, would you choose to use? I know Julie's would be Accio. And I know it 100%. But anyway, Hermione does use the Dittany, and it does begin to heal Ron. The fresh new wound seems like it's now a couple of days old, starting to regrow skin.
Yeah, with Hermione also calling out that this is the only thing she feels comfortable using to heal Ron, because any type of spell she's worried would actually make it worse. Which I think, like, there's the talk of like, oh, splinching isn't actually as funny as we thought it was. But I feel like that also drives it home that even Hermione is like, yeah, the spell's to fix this. Like, I'm not messing with this.
Mm-hmm. So Hermione does start to explain why they can't go back to Grimmauld Place. And in that explanation, Yaxley caught hold of Hermione as they were apparating away from the Ministry. And she believes they took him inside the Fidelius charm, thus making him as well a secret keeper.
That just... it makes me so sad.
It's tough because they're in a very stressed situation. But, like, Hermione, when they were in a stressed situation at the wedding, apparates to some random road in London. When Harry is stressed, he apparates to, I get it, a safe place. When
he apparates to home.
He apparates home where he views it as a safe haven, which is fine, but if something should go wrong, you know, you're not bouncing locations.
Yeah.
You're going straight to a place where you don't want anybody to be.
But the flip side of that is, like, I get why Hermione's gut reaction was, we need to go somewhere else. But at that point, it's 3 against 1. So why not just go to Grimmauld Place and
stun them, do a memory charm,
stun them,
apparate them somewhere else?
Yeah, like, do anything else to, like, keep it, especially with the emotional connection. Like, it's literally the only place that Harry can really call home that's a home.
You could ambush Yaxley. Well, you'd have to get him into the house, I suppose, because if you're on the doorstep and you get outside of the Fidelius charm, there might still be Death Eaters in the square.
Yeah.
And that's a tight space. But if you could subdue Yaxley, then you could do a memory charm on him. You could have Creature drop him off who knows where.
Yeah. And now we go camping, Dan.
Now they are in the grounds where the Quidditch World Cup was held. So, speaking of crumbs that she's dropping throughout the books, she's going back to other things. I think, the first couple of chapters, we've gotten hints of big events or big, details from the series that have just got dropped in, and now the Quidditch World Cup. So they decide to settle here for the moment because they're like, well, the people can find us because last time Hermione apparated us somewhere, they found us quickly. So that might happen again, but Ron is not really in any condition to go, so we should probably settle. Awesome. Hermione begins setting enchantments around the location. She sets Salvio Hexia, Protego Totalum, Repello Muggleton, Muffliato, and Cave Inimicum. I'm going to go with that pronunciation.
Sure.
Among others, presumably. While Harry gets the tent out, which Hermione sets up very easily with...
Why does Hermione have to do everything for these two? Everything. She fixes Ron's splinching. She sets all the protection charms. She sets up the tent because Harry pulls out the tent and is like, how do we do this? And Hermione's like, ugh, men. And then just does it.
I don't think she's men. I think she's just these particular men.
No, she's like, ugh, men. And does it. Like, Harry and Ron would have died so many times if they decided to never befriend Hermione. There would be no book 2.
To be fair, Hermione would have also perished a couple of times if it hadn't been for Harry.
Okay, but there would be no book 2 if there was no Hermione.
Hermione is almost done for in book 1. If they didn't do Wingardium Leviosa on the Troll, Hermione's done in book 1.
But they would have been done in book 1 by the time that they got to the Devil's Snare.
Or the riddle about the potions. She also helps
Devil's Snare is first, so they would have both been strangled by Devil's Snare, so...
Yeah. They're all important, it's why it's a trio.
But they'd all be dead if it weren't for Hermione.
Hermione is an important piece to the trio, yes. But Harry does get the tent out, which you would love, because it is pretty much a glamping scenario. They were about to say Voldy's name before Ron shouts at them to stop. And he says, we should really start actually putting some respect on Voldy's name.
Oof. Ron, read the room. I want to talk about this more later.
We could talk about it more later, but in the context of right now, I mean, I get both points. Hermione and Harry on the side of, look, Dumbledore said fear of the name increases fear of the individual. Valid. That's correct. But Ron being like, hey, he is kind of ruling the wizarding world at the moment. We should be careful with how we proceed.
I mean, I just think respect was the wrong word to use.
Harry literally calls him out on the word respect. He's like, respect? Really?
I think there's... I don't even know what word I would use instead of respect in this scenario, but
care. Take care when mentioning his name. Well, Harry describes this wonderful tent again, and the tent has a bathroom and a tiny kitchen, as well as bunk beds and like a living area and such and such.
Listen, one of my requirements for camping is that I need to have an actual bed and temperature control and a bathroom. So I guess this is fine. I can go camping with the trio.
I think you would be just fine with this. I think this would do okay. So in their downtime now, they do consider the Cattermoles and what their fate might be. Take note, by the way, I don't think we mentioned this in the last chapter. When they left the ministry, or when they literally went through the fire place, Mary went through and they told her, like, go get your kids, go. Reg didn't come through the fireplace.
Yeah.
Reg stayed in the Ministry of Magic. I wonder how that dynamic goes. So this wondering about how the Cattermoles are doing is a really valid thought of, like, I hope Mary and the kids got away. What does Reg do now? Does he have to try to denounce his wife and kids?
It helps add to the, like, realization that there's collateral damage for everything they do. Like, before it could have just been that Mary goes to Azkaban, and now it could be that they all end up with a Dementor's kiss.
Well, I think that's something that Harry is beginning to realize maybe a little bit, because he's so caught up in the prophecy. He's very caught up
in the moment.
He's so caught up in the prophecy and being like, oh, it's me and Voldy in the end. Like, it all comes down to me and Voldy. It all comes down to me and Voldy. There are real people dying, disappearing, and having real hardships here. It's not just Harry.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of collateral damage being done, whether Harry has an actual hand in that damage or not. Mm-hmm. Like, he could be out here in the woods, and there's still someone being tortured and killed somewhere. There are people suffering in Azkaban. Not to say Harry doesn't feel the weight of it, because he does feel the stress of, like, I don't know where to go, and I feel like this need of needing to go, but I don't know where. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like how we talked about with that search for Dumbledore, and, like, he's trying to see Dumbledore in places to get some guidance, and he's gone.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's a really complicated place where Harry's at.
Yeah.
But anyway. They do remember, oh wait, we have the locket.
Oh, right, that thing.
Yeah, and each of them try to open it, stunningly, and they cannot. And Harry decides that the best way to keep it safe is by wearing it himself.
Yep, that makes sense.
So he puts it around his neck, next to the little pouch from Hagrid.
Yeah, and they do note that the locket itself, that both Ron and Harry feel almost like a heartbeat or blood pulsing through it. And while Harry wears it, he says that the locket itself doesn't absorb any of his body heat. It still feels cold even after it's been on him for a majority of the night.
So, do you think Umbridge felt that? And furthermore, do you think she'll notice the difference with the duplicate locket of, like, hey, this doesn't feel the same?
That's actually a good question. I don't know that she necessarily did.
Well, they end up deciding that they need to take turns as lookout. Specifically Harry and Hermione, because they're able to do so. Ron is still recovering. But as Harry takes a turn, negative thoughts begin to plague him. A lot of what we just talked about with, hey, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what to do. Everything's dependent on me. And does Ron and Hermione even, like, oh man, I'm the odd one out. Like, everything that's negative is starting to just collapse in upon Harry as he's taking this watch. And it's going, and then all of a sudden he drifts into sleep and another vision. And in the vision, it starts with, "Give it to me, Grigorovich." Seems as though Voldy has found the wand maker, and who, by the way, looks like a trussed-up Father Christmas, which is a description that I do not remember originally reading.
Nope.
So Grigorovich kind of looks like Santa. Okay, that's an interesting image. That I don't know what I envisioned Grigorovich looking like prior to this.
That?
But now it's an odd image that I have. But anyway, Voldy seems to think Grigorovich is lying when he says he doesn't have what Voldy is looking for. And this is an interesting description. Pupils became very wide, dilated with fear, and they swelled bigger and bigger until their blackness swallowed Harry whole. So we've gotten the one side of legilimens and occlumens, usually Harry trying to do occlumens against an attack. Now we get the other point of view where Voldy is going into the mind of someone else, and we get that view of like what legilimens might feel or look like, which is
Wild.
weird. It feels like
It almost feels like you're being sucked in.
feels indecent almost. Like you're like, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
you're like breaking into something private.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a weird feeling. The memory that Harry sees via Voldy inside of Grigorovich, do you follow me? Is that of a thief in Grigorovich's workshop. And the thief seems to have accomplished his goal and exits through the window. And Harry is left with seeing Grigorovich again, but a flash of green light. So Harry is eager to spill all the tea on this wonderful vision that he's just had. And Hermione is not having it. She goes off on him again about occlumency and how he should be practicing and he shouldn't be seeing any of this and blah, 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 blah.
Question for you, Dan.
Yes.
Do you think Harry wearing the Horcrux makes his dreams, visions, whatever you want to call it, more powerful or stronger? Since now he already has that connection to Voldemort, but now he's also wearing a piece of Voldemort's soul. So do you think that like puts a satellite on his head essentially? Because now...
So do I think if the locket is enhancing a connection to Voldy?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Because it is a piece of his soul.
it is a piece of his soul that you're wearing fairly close to your heart. So it
when you
could
already
enhance.
have that strong, like, mental link with Voldemort.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely could impact it. Hermione gives him a little sass with it, being like, well, if you're so tired and you're falling asleep on your watch, I guess I'll take over then. I guess I'll do it.
Ugh, men.
In this case, there's extenuating circumstances, but sure. Sure. Ron, however, is all about it. He's like, oh, give me all that info. Hit me. Tell me everything. Like a bro should. Like a bro. So Harry tells him all about the vision and that the thief looks very familiar to Harry, but he can't place where.
Huh.
And it was that thief that Voldy now targets. And that's where the chapter ends. So, pretty short, compacted chapter. I know we spent a lot of this chapter arguing about
Past chapter.
the ministry. We probably spent like 20 minutes actually talking about the chapter. But yeah, it's a little short, compact chapter. It does feature them beginning to camp. Mm-hmm. However, it is spliced with another look into Voldy's actions and feelings and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. Did you feel overwhelmed by the camping, or
This is the beginning of the camping. It's not overwhelming in the beginning.
every time I have you on for a semi-camping chapter, I'm going to ask you if you're overwhelmed by the camping?
The answer will be yes.
Fair enough. But do you have anything else for the non-spoilers?
For non-spoilers, no.
We do have some spoilers to dip into.
Lots of spoilers. Talk.
So we will be back after the break with the spoiler section of Chapter 14, The Thief.
Before we get to our break sound, I'd like to acknowledge our friend Andy, who helps us produce our intros and our break sounds. If you want to hear more of Andy's work and like Formula One racing, check out the Outlap F1 podcast. It's your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. You can find them wherever you listen to podcasts, and they even have a YouTube page. So check out Andy, Cody, John, James, and Deanna, and join them on the Outlap.
Dobby has no master. Dobby is a free elf.
All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 14, The Thief. We will discuss that thief here in a minute, but we have some other stuff to get to. Let's start with the taboo.
Yes, with Ron saying that they should put respect on Voldemort's name. It's kind of funny because it's such a, borderline offensive thing for Ron to say to Harry, like, hey, we should respect him, the person that, is responsible for the death of
your parents,
all of your family,
yeah,
and who has made, the past 7 years of your life awful, well, your entire life awful, because if your parents didn't die, you wouldn't have been at the Dursleys,
right.
And,
Yep.
But, borderline offensive, but then it turns out to actually be a really smart, and I feel like Ron, throughout the whole series, is, a sleeper agent. Because he always just kind of feels like the buddy that tags along, and obviously, that kind of comes to a head come Order of the Phoenix, but he's just kind of like a sleeper agent that every once in a while says things that once you, go back and you're rereading, you're like, wait, Ron, look at you.
Oh, yeah.
You were so smart, because there's the worry that when they get to the campground, that when Hermione had randomly apparated them to the street, the cafe.
The street and then the cafe, the diner. Yeah.
They were worried that they were being tracked, and that's how they got there. Whereas in reality, since they didn't put respect on that name. I don't know, is that still a thing that people say?
I'm sure it is, yeah.
Since they didn't put respect on that name, that's how they were found out. And it's kind of funny that Harry and Hermione both, give Ron a bunch of grief for saying put respect on the name, when in reality, that's what keeps them safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that he uses the phrase respect, because I feel like he hits it right on the head, because that's kind of what Voldy wants. Well, he wants fear of the name, not so much respect. Well, he'll take both. But that's the idea, is if you are so bold as to use my name and say it out loud, you will have consequences.
Yeah.
And hence the reason for the taboo. Also, he puts it in place because he knows only those that are opposed to him, because of Dumbledore's whole fear the name, fear the person crusade. He knows that, okay, if people are using my name, it's probably in defiance of it. So it's an easy way to target. Ron obviously hits it right on the head with that the taboo thing, even though he doesn't know it yet. Although he is the one to officially declare it later in this book.
Yeah, and it's also kind of the beginning of the strife between all of them. Is right about now, where they all kind of splinter. They all get emotionally splinched.
Wow. Look at you using Harry Potter vocabulary in a new way. Yeah, I mean, in a way, yes. They all get in their feelings a little bit. And
I kind of wonder if, instead of wearing the Horcrux, if they had put it in Hermione's bag, if it would have helped. I mean, it's still around all of them.
It would dull it, you would think.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess then you're worrying about
Man, Phineas would be so cranky. I don't know if it works on a portrait or not, but I like the thought anyway.
But it makes me, kind of wonder if that would have helped things a little bit. But then, of course, you have to make sure that you don't lose the bag, and then you'd wear the bag, which is that the same as wearing a locket? But
I get Harry's thought about the safest place is on my person.
Yeah.
Because, if they get close enough to me to take this, then I'm in trouble anyway.
Yeah.
I get it, but it's still a risk when you know it's a part of Voldy's soul and you know what the diary did.
Yeah.
Like, he might not know what the ring did, although he saw what it did to Albus's hand.
Yeah.
But you know what the diary did. Yeah. So wouldn't you be a little cautious about putting that thing on?
You would think, but again, like, Harry does not make smart choices unless he's triaging a situation.
I guess, but yeah, it's risky. And obviously it plays out to be very risky because as he sits down for his first watch, there's a reason all the negativity creeps in out of seemingly nowhere.
Yeah.
And that just starts to pile on and pile on and pile on, and negative thoughts and bad thoughts creep into his mind.
Yeah.
And that's partially, maybe even the majority, the Horcrux. I mean, let's be real, those thoughts are probably going to creep in anyway, but
not necessarily to the extent that they do.
Mm-hmm. I think that's, if you're going to complain about the camping, I might begrudge the fact that they go, and we can see how this actually plays out as we read the chapters, but how many times they go through this carousel of people wearing the locket before they finally realize, hey, it might be the locket.
Yeah. I have a lot of unresolved issues with this book in general. The camping, to me, just feels like a cop-out because they couldn't be at Hogwarts, and so you needed to put them somewhere, but you can't put them in, like, an actual home because how is that safe?
You know what Harry really should have been talking to Horace Slughorn about in his 6th year? How to evade Death Eaters. Because Slughorn did it really well. And he was living in fairly decent luxury while doing it.
Yes.
He wasn't camping out in some random woods. He was in, like, homes. He should have been picking up lessons from Slughorn.
Yeah, well.
Anyway. So, let's actually talk about the thief, because we can talk about the thief more in the thief chapter in the spoiler section than we can in the actual non-spoiler.
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit in the spoiler section last chapter of Harry finding the Book of Dumbledore. Harry sees this picture of a young Albus and a mysterious, blonde, curly-haired, similarly aged individual that when Harry is in Umbridge's office, he's like, oh, I should read the caption and find out who this is. And conveniently, that's when Pius walks into the room. Ironically, less than 12 hours later, Harry has vision, dream, whatever you want to call it, connecting to Voldemort. And in Grigorovich's mind, sees a youngish, blonde, curly-haired teenager, child, man, whatever age I forget the age range that he is at that time. And
Young
Harry's
adult.
like,
Yeah.
huh, well, he looks kind of familiar. I just find it a little funny that it's like, 12 hours tops?
I would even say 12 hours.
I'm being generous.
Yeah.
But
Well, maybe, because it's now nighttime. Yeah, maybe.
But 12 hours, and there isn't a, I saw this face semi-recently.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, that face is Grindelwald, and he's stealing something that Voldy cherishes very, very much. He's trying to go for a Hallow. Ooh. Maybe one of the Deathly Hallows.
What?
I know. It's interesting that Voldy decided to go the Horcrux route instead of the Deathly Hallow route. So did Voldy never place all that much importance on quote-unquote, children's tales? Or did he not even know about them because he didn't really come into the wizarding world? He very similarly came into the wizarding world like Harry did.
Yeah. So my guess is that he probably wouldn't have heard it. And given what we know of Tom Riddle, even if he heard about it while at Hogwarts, there's no part of me that it's like, oh, Tom Riddle really wants to know what children's stories are told to wizards.
Hey, he's sleeping on Babbity Rabbity. I'm just telling you. That is some grade A.
But
grade
Harry
A literature.
Also wouldn't know the story because he had so much other stuff to worry about every single time he stepped into Hogwarts that he doesn't have time to listen to oh yeah, what was that children's story that you talked about? Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that since there's so many Muggle-borns that also go to Hogwarts, I wonder how many references professors purposely leave out when they're teaching.
Maybe. Or even just, like, there has to be a student there. I mean, they start when they're 11.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be a student there with a copy of the Tales of the Beetle and Bard, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it would get to them. And, like, from, as far as saying that, like, Voldemort didn't realize the Deathly Hallows, like, I don't think Voldemort is that Tom Riddle is the type of person who would have put any credence into a children's story. Especially with the childhood that he had.
Which then indicates that he's hit such a point of desperation with wands, specifically, that now he's had to delve into
Wand
potential
lore.
myth.
Yeah, because it's one of the things that Harry brings up is that he was shocked that there was not more convo with wand lore, and you didn't ask Grigorovich for any wand lore, and then you got rid of him, so now how are you going to get the wand lore? Because Harry's whole thought process was that Voldemort was trying to get around the twin cores. But at this point, Voldemort was already past that. So he probably already knows the general lore of the twin cores, just like Dumbledore did. But then when you're delving deeper and you're trying to figure out how to get around that, and you know that no other wand is going to work for you like the wand that chose you, like, then all of a sudden you start having to delve into the what ifs, and then you start looking, you're like, wait, hold on. And that would be my assumption of how Voldemort goes down that path versus reading a children's story.
You know what strikes me in this chapter too is he doesn't waste a second in eliminating Grigorovich. Once he has the information he needs and he's crossed his T's and dotted his I's, he does not waste a second in killing Grigorovich. However, Ollivander, still captive, even though he's assuming he's milked all of the knowledge that Ollivander has, he's still alive in a cellar at Malfoy Manor. And I think it goes to, as twisted and as warped and as sociopathic as Voldy is, he does have some anchor. He does have some, like, code to him, as warped as it may be, where he won't attack Hogwarts yet, unless absolutely necessary and provoked.
Yeah.
He won't attack teachers, again, unless absolutely 100% necessary and provoked, because he holds Hogwarts to such a high esteem.
Yeah.
And he clearly has that same esteem for Ollivander, who presumably gave him his wand and his entry into a magical world himself.
He's nostalgic.
Yeah, so there's some grounding factor in him. Granted, he's not treating Ollivander all the best.
But I also think that he has Ollivander and Grigorovich because of their knowledge, and with Grigorovich knowing who took the Elder Wand, Voldemort doesn't want anyone else to have that information. He doesn't want anyone to find Grigorovich and somehow get additional information.
So why not capture him and put him in the same cellar? Because he's a great... So Grigorovich...
Because he has Death Eaters around that are tending to him that can get that information. Voldemort, at the end of the day, trusts no one besides himself.
No, agreed.
So he now has this information that gets him exactly what he wants. So he doesn't want anyone else to have it. He doesn't want anyone to pull a Snape and change their mind, or like any way for anyone or anything to get that information out, because Voldemort needs to be the one that gets the Elder Wand.
Grigorovich, by all accounts, and even if Voldy is seeking him out, he must have a high regard for the level of magical knowledge that Grigorovich has. And if Voldy has also shown a clear preference towards magical ability and talents, whether he thinks it's because they're pureblood or not, whatever. Because why doesn't he just kill Arthur Weasley? He could. Mm-hmm. He probably should, because he's a known antagonist to me and everything I'm trying to do. Why don't you just kill him? Why? because he's pureblood. So
I think it's just because
why
he
not-
has to go out of his way to do it.
like, I get what you're saying. I obviously don't want the info to leak about him going after a Deathly Hallow potentially, but you're killing a pretty prestigious magical figure worldwide.
But I would argue the reason he's not killing Arthur is because Arthur is not directly in his path. Like, yes, Voldemort kills just to kill, but most of the time when we see Voldemort killing, it's either Muggleborns specifically, or someone who is in his way for something. And yes, Arthur is technically in his way, but Arthur also gets attacked by Nagini, so he does go after Arthur because Arthur is in his way.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in his way as a, like, the Order of the Phoenix is
No, like,
working
literally
against him,
he's
but,
between an object
he
and-
needs to literally be physically in your way for doing something. I think Hogwarts has that level of respect and admiration because without Hogwarts, he would have never gotten to his
It's his home,
potential.
too.
Yeah, and it's
Not
his
only Harry's,
home,
it's his.
like, and I think he would have never reached what he sees as his potential. I think that not attacking the professors is part of the admiration for Hogwarts, but part of the fear of Dumbledore as well, because you're directly coming after Dumbledore's people.
I think he reveres the teachers as, like, stewards of magic. Like, I think he puts respect on, like, Flitwick and McGonagall and teachers of that ilk because they're stewards of magic.
Yeah.
He wanted to be one of them.
True. But he also has the curse on the defense against the dark arts position.
Well, because
so he
that's the
doesn't
position he wanted.
revere it that much. But
If I can't have it, no one can.
But I think that he got rid of Grigorovich specifically because he has information that, if leaked, ruins his plan. Ollivander, you could put in that same nostalgia of Hogwarts, because if he got his wand from Ollivander, Ollivander is the one who gave him the ability to harness his magic.
Because, I mean, Ollivander's not a dumb guy. He can understand the door that Voldy is knocking on.
Yeah, and I'm sure he knows, but you also take out Ollivander because when you have the two most skilled wand makers out of the way, and you're also taking wands away from Muggleborns, you're limiting the amount of people who have power to rise up against you. So I don't necessarily think that he's keeping Ollivander safe out of, like, reverence for the craft. It might be as a nostalgia as the one who gives him power, but also as someone that, like, if he can't harness the power of the Elder Wand, he's going to need a wand master to help.
Well, yeah, so I was thinking, like, literally the reason... It's not a respect of the craft, because if it was purely a respect of the craft, he would have kept Grigorovich alive. I think it's the nostalgia of him getting his wand from Ollivander, giving him this opening to the magical world.
But I think if Ollivander had the information of Grindelwald instead of Grigorovich, Ollivander would be dead and Grigorovich would be...
The one in the cellar?
Yes.
Maybe.
Because he still needs a wand master, so to speak, for when he gets the Elder Wand.
We had one more spoiler, yes?
Yes. One more thing that I brought up to you the other day that I was randomly thinking about. I kept thinking about how the trio, and Harry in particular, keep getting into these life-threatening situations and all come out relatively unscathed most of the time. Thinking about the Department of Mysteries I was thinking more about it and then remembering that Harry is a Horcrux and wondering how much that impacts the fact that Harry has made it this far in life. Because in this chapter, so originally I wanted to talk about this last chapter, but it fit a little bit better this time around because when they're looking at the locket, Harry says it's in perfect, pristine condition. So this locket is how many thousands of years old. And, like, it doesn't matter how well made something is.
It get
If
tarnished
it's that
or
old, it's going to get
dented
tarnished or scratched or chipped or something, but it's in perfect, pristine condition.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a Horcrux in there. It's not like it's going to let you polish it.
Yeah.
And it kind of lends to my theory that Harry being a Horcrux has given him additional protection and potentially additional, like, oomph in his magic. Because the Horcruxes, at the end of the day, we see it with every Horcrux that's been destroyed, the Horcrux fights back. Until you have, you know, stuck the basilisk venom in it, or used the Sword of Gryffindor, or whatever, like, it fights back. So how much of Harry using, you know, entry-level magic to defend himself is actually the Horcrux putting a bubble around him? And it's not saying that Harry doesn't get hurt. We've seen Harry get hurt before, but nothing that's ever been full mortal danger. Like when Harry...
We've seen him get cut up and all kinds of stuff, yeah. Or broken bones, obviously.
Yeah, but, you know, Harry can be put in any type of dangerous situation and comes out relatively unscathed. Could that even be why when Voldemort tries to kill Harry in Sorcerer's Stone, Goblet of Fire, that it's the Horcrux being like, well, man, don't do this.
Well, I think here's the issue is I think Dumbledore says it's odd if he put a Horcrux in a living creature, referring to Nagini, because generally speaking, you wouldn't want to put a Horcrux in a living creature because they can be put at risk often.
Yeah.
It's why Nagini is at one point in this book kept very, very close. It's vulnerable.
Yes.
So, by anything, let's say it's not Nagini and it's a massive python.
But still, Nagini is killed by the Sword of Gryffindor.
Yeah.
So you still have to kill with a very specific means. So would a killing curse...
To kill the soul within it. Like, to kill the Horcrux. But could you kill the snake specifically and have the Horcrux remain intact?
I think the Horcrux would keep the snake alive.
Okay.
Because it's still a soul, and they even say that while they're holding it, it feels like there's like a heartbeat or blood rushing through it. So my theory that I have, anyone feel free to debunk me, because I just thought about this the random day, so I've not delved too deep. But the Horcrux is going to protect its vessel because the Horcrux wants to live. We've seen it with every Horcrux that we've experienced. We see it with any Horcrux in the future, that with the exception of one or two things, well, there's more than one or two, but like with the exception of a few items, they can't be destroyed. They're borderline impenetrable. And like, yes, Nagini could die, but it's still a piece of soul, which I would assume would just almost like re-inhabit Nagini.
Or does it do something like Quirrell, where he's possessed by the fragment of Voldy's essence or soul or whatever you want to call it, and Quirrell's body is destroyed, but then the soul leaves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know. There's just been so many instances where we look back and they use like the most basic level 1 magic and make it out when it doesn't make sense. And for me, the Hall of Mysteries is the biggest one, where you're up against a bunch of Death Eaters who are well practiced in magic and know what they're doing, especially when it comes to doing harm. And you all just so happen to make it out relatively unscathed. And so how much of Harry surviving this far is from him being a Horcrux? And I'm not saying that Harry doesn't have innate magical ability and is relatively skilled at the 3 spells that he uses all the time. Oh my
goodness. I was on board until the 3 spell thing.
And I'm not saying that like he doesn't have magical ability of his own, or that he's not a skilled wizard, but when you look at what he's constantly up against, doesn't it make sense that the Horcrux is amping him a little bit, and that's how he always seems to prevail? It's either that or pure dumb luck.
Honestly, I get your point of view, and it's not a bad theory that I can get behind. However, in the case of Harry, I think it is a lot of pure dumb luck. And a lot of help from a lot of other people, which he acknowledges, too, at some point. Of, like, he gets, like, in the Order of the Phoenix, that original meeting of the DA, he's like, I get a lot of help. Mm-hmm. Like, there's always people helping me, whether it's the two by my side, you guys, or Sirius, or Lupin, or Dumbledore, I mean, on and on and on and on. Hagrid and all of these people. Yeah, a lot of help. But a lot of it does tend to be dumb luck.
But is it dumb luck, or is it the Horcrux essentially forcing dumb luck to preserve itself? Because every Horcrux that we come across has some level of self-defense mechanism, whether it's just making you feel bad or it attacks you when you try to... Like, even think about the diary. The diary pretty much attacks and drains Ginny to bring itself into a corporeal form. They're all fragments of a soul that keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the defense mechanism has to attack. Like, yes, Voldemort puts all of these precautions around most of his Horcruxes.
To be fair, we don't know what the diadem or the cup actually do, because we never really got...
Yeah, we don't really, like, get...
much of anything from them. But, no, I get where you're going. I just don't know if it makes him perfectly invulnerable, since we've seen him
Well, I'm not
harmed
saying perfectly
all the time.
invulnerable. I'm just saying is the reason that
He's still alive, despite all the danger?
Still alive, despite all the danger, despite everything, isn't just that, you know, they all happen to cast the right spell at the right time, but it's also Harry casts Expelliarmus in the cemetery, and maybe he was quicker to the draw because of the Horcrux.
I think in Harry's case, it's a combination of his own talents and ability, which is a real tangible force that he has. Because even after the events of these books, he does become an Auror, he does hunt down dark wizards, he does put himself in danger often, and whatever. So I think there is his own talent and ability. I think there is sheer dumb luck. And I think there is just a lot of people who jump in front of him to take the shot.
Yeah, but I would also argue that with him being an Auror, like, if the Horcrux is giving him extra juice, that it's also going to build his confidence and his ability to do magic. We see so frequently that the people who are confident in the magic that they're doing have stronger magic. You're confident in what you're doing. There's no questioning it. You don't accidentally misspeak. So having all of this time where, you know, his Patronus, for example, is so strong, like, he gains confidence and he realizes that he can perform this with extreme skill. So having that level of confidence, getting through all these hurdles, is going to make his magic naturally stronger. What happens if Harry gets a Dementor's kiss? Does that kill the Horcrux?
Oh, that is a good question.
I was just thinking about that, because how would the Horcrux protect itself?
Does it leave the Voldy one behind and just take Harry's?
Would it take both?
Would it take both? That's a good question. That's a great question to end on. We should just leave a huge cliffhanger for the people.
Yeah. All right, guys, let us know what you think.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Give us comments on that. What do you think about that interesting question that Julie just posed at the very end of this episode to leave us on a cliffhanger?
Yay!
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. There's been a lot to it. We have debated, we've argued, we've come to no actual conclusions, but it's been fun.
Other than Dan is wrong.
Ugh. Seriously, though, thank you for all of the comments and all of the input. Please keep all that coming, because even if they're contrary opinions, that's fine. I like reading them. I like debating them. It's a great time, and that's what we have built this podcast on. So thank you all for listening, and we will come back and discuss Julie's question that she posed.
Yes, and I want to hear everyone's opinion on my theory. I want to see if I've sparked anyone to go down the same.
Maybe Jen will
path.
hear this and dive down a very deep, dark Reddit hole somewhere. I don't know.
Yes, I would love that. But I just want to hear what everyone else thinks about it. If it's something that you all agree is logical and that's maybe how Harry's gotten this far, or if you all just think I'm just making random things up to get us to argue with Dan more. I don't know. I'm okay with both, I think.
Camping is fun. Okay, here we go. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week with Chapter 15. Thank you for listening.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.